Welcome and settle in. Tonight, we will spend a very ordinary day in a quiet town of Song Dynasty China. Nothing remarkable will happen. There will only be dawn, tea, rain on tiled roofs, paper, lantern light, and the slow passage of hours. So let your eyes close, let your breathing ease, and let the day unfold at the pace of a brush moving across paper. Imagine a small town beside fields and low hills, with gray roof tiles, wooden doors, a temple among old trees, and a market street that wakes without hurry. It is an ordinary day, much like the day before, and much like the day after, and that is why it is such a peaceful place to rest. Chapter 1. Before dawn. The town is still dark when the first people wake. The eastern sky is only a softer shade of black, and the roof tiles still hold the coolness of the night. In one small house, a farmer rises from his sleeping mat, reaches for his jacket, and opens the door just enough to feel the damp morning air. The yard smells of wet earth, ash, and leaves. In the kitchen corner, a small fire is lit. Dry twigs catch first, then a thicker piece of wood, and a clay kettle is set above the flame. Water warms slowly, as it has on countless mornings before this one. Tea will come in its own time, before anyone drinks. There are the small preparations that belong only to early morning. A lid is lifted, set down, and lifted again. A bowl is warmed near the kettle. A little grain is measured out by hand, not hurried, not counted aloud, simply known by feel. The fire is watched for a moment, then gently adjusted with a stick, so the heat stays even. In houses like these, morning does not begin with a single act. It begins with several small ones, each quiet enough to be almost forgotten, even while they're being done. A sleeve is tied back, a jar is opened, a cloth is folded once and placed near the table. Someone glances toward the doorway to judge the color of the sky, then returns to the kettle without comment. These are not important tasks in the way histories usually speak of importance. Yet for the people living this day, such tasks are the shape of life itself. Warm water, kindled fire, the first tea, the first look into the yard. A morning is made from these small things long before it is made from anything larger. Nearby, someone lowers a bucket into a well. The rope slides over wood with a low, familiar sound. The bucket rises again, cold and heavy, carrying water for tea, for washing rice, and for rinsing a face still warm from sleep. Beyond the houses, farmers move along narrow paths toward the fields. Their tools rest on shoulders polished smooth by years of use. A hoe, a carrying pole, and a basket with cord handles. Their sandals darken slightly with dew as they cross the grass. Rows of greens lie low to the ground, and the soil, when pressed between thumb and finger, says enough about the day ahead. Back in town, the kettle begins to whisper. Tea leaves go into a bowl. Steam rises in a thin ribbon, and hands gather around the warmth. The first sip tastes grassy, faintly bitter, and gently sweet at the end. The warmth spreads outward slowly, as morning itself spreads across the sky. In the temple courtyard, a monk is already sweeping. The broom draws soft lines over the flagstones, gathering leaves into a shallow heap. Sweep, pause, and sweep again. He moves without hurry, and the task seems less like labor than part of the morning air. Somewhere beyond the roofs, a bell sounds once. It is distant and rounded by the cool air, and when it fades, the darkness has already begun to loosen. Gray becomes pale silver. The day has begun, though only just. Chapter 2. The Morning Market. By the time the light reaches the market street, the town is awake in the mildest possible way. Wooden shutters are opened, door bars are lifted, and a few stalls are unfolded from their night shapes into their day shapes. The street is never loud. Even when busy, it is full of small sounds, rather than large ones. A vegetable seller arranges bundles of greens still cool with moisture. Beside them are pale radishes, spring onions, and round cabbages packed tight as fists. A woman wipes a board with a wet cloth before setting out cakes of tofu. Nearby, jars of soy sauce, vinegar, and bean paste sit in a careful row, giving off their deep, quiet smell. Cloth merchants shake out bolts of hemp and ramie, with a little silk for those who can afford it. The fabric hangs softly in the morning air, while folds are straightened and edges aligned. A merchant steps back, studies the display, and adjusts one corner by only the width of a finger. Tea sellers are among the first to welcome customers. Water is already hot, bowls are warmed, and tea is poured in slow circles. Some people drink standing before beginning work. Others sit beneath the eaves and hold the bowl in both hands, as though there is no better use for a quiet minute. Bargaining is gentle here. One number is suggested, another is offered, and after a shrug or a small smile, a sale is made. Copper coins change hands with a brief metallic sound. Children pass through the street carrying errands, a jar for oil, a wrapped measure of tea, a bundle of scallions, or a folded note. Their sleeves are a little too long, but they know the street well and move through it without fuss. From time to time, a pack animal passes by with balanced bundles tied at its sides. Its hooves make a dull rhythm on packed earth, and no one expects it to move quickly. In an ordinary town, on an ordinary morning, even movement seems to understand the value of moderation. Above the street, bamboo blinds shift slightly at upper windows, smoke from cook fires rises, and breakfast remains simple. Rice gruel, pickled vegetables, perhaps a steamed bun if the morning is long. A brush seller lays out bamboo handles, dark ink sticks, and stacks of paper held flat by a smooth stone. As the sun rises higher, brightness spreads across roof edges and signboards, but the market never loses its calm. Goods are arranged, tea is poured, coins are counted, and greetings are exchanged. Another morning proceeds as so many mornings have proceeded before it, and already the day is leaning gently toward noon. At the edges of the market, where fewer people stop to look, the smallest details remain the most peaceful. A damp footprint fades slowly from stone. A folded cloth waits beneath a counter. A bamboo basket, now half empty, keeps the smell of fresh greens in its woven strips. A tea bowl left on a bench has already cooled enough to lose most of its steam. Even the things not being sold seem to belong to the rhythm of the street. A broom resting against a wall, a coil of rope beside a crate, a balance scale hanging still for a moment between customers, a signboard darkened at the edges by many seasons of rain. Nothing asks to be admired. Everything simply remains where daily use has placed it. If someone were to pass through this market quickly, much of it would seem ordinary enough to miss. But that is exactly what makes it restful. The day is not trying to impress anyone. It is only proceeding in its usual order, with bowls, baskets, coins, cloth, and soft voices repeating themselves from stall to stall. Chapter 3. Midday Stillness. By noon, the town has become quieter, not because everyone is gone, but because warmth and habit have slowed every motion. The market still exists, though in a softer form, with fewer footsteps, lower voices, and longer pauses between small transactions. The sun stands high above the tiled roofs, though today its light is muted by thin cloud. Heat gathers anyway in courtyards, under eaves, and on stone paths. Doors remain only half open, and bamboo blinds are lowered to soften the brightness, casting narrow stripes across wooden floors. At midday in such a town, almost nothing moves quickly. In kitchens, rice has been cooked, broth has been ladled, and simple dishes have been set out in plain bowls. Salted greens, bean curd, and perhaps a little fish if the household is fortunate. People eat without ceremony because ceremony is unnecessary for an ordinary meal. When it ends, bowls are rinsed, chopsticks are set to dry, and a cloth passes once over the table. After the meal, some people rest. A shopkeeper leans back on a stool with his eyes closed. A grandmother sits near a doorway with mending in her lap, though her hand has stopped moving. A child sleeps against a folded cushion, and even the cat in the corner does not bother to change position. Then a light rain begins. It starts so quietly that it is almost mistaken for wind and leaves, but soon it becomes the gentle ticking of drops on roof tiles. Water darkens wood, deepens the color of stone, and leaves behind the cool smell of wet earth. Heat loosens, dust settles, and the whole town seems to breathe more slowly. At the temple, the monk who swept at dawn now sets the broom beneath the covered walkway. Rain beads along the edge of the roof and falls in measured drops. Somewhere inside, a page is turned. Somewhere else, a kettle is reheated. The silence between these small sounds feels especially deep. In the fields, farmers pause beneath straw cloaks or under a rough shelter. Tools are leaned against a post. Water drips from hat brims, and no one seems troubled by the interruption. Rain is simply part of the day, as ordinary as morning tea or the evening lamp. Back in town, the market street has thinned to a line of sheltered figures under awnings. One merchant covers his goods with cloth. Another sits with his hands in his sleeves and watches the rain in complete familiarity. The rain does not grow heavy. It simply continues for a while, laying a thin hush over roofs, gates, leaves, and stone steps, until the softened noon begins to gather itself into afternoon. Chapter 4. The Scholar's Afternoon. In one room near the quieter end of town, a scholar sits at a desk beside an open window. He is not writing a decree or a famous poem. He is copying text, patiently and carefully, one line after another. The afternoon is long enough for such work, and such work is long enough for the afternoon. On the desk are the ordinary companions of study: an inkstone, a water dropper, a brush rest, paperweights, a copied text on one side, and blank paper on the other. Before he begins again, the scholar grinds ink with a little water. The sound is soft and repetitive, one of the quietest kinds of labor, while the scent of soot and resin gradually rises from the darkening pool. The room itself seems arranged for patience. Light enters through the window in a muted sheet, touching the desk first, then the edge of the floor, then the lower part of the wall. Nothing in the room shines brightly. Wood remains matte. Paper remains pale. The ink alone holds a deeper darkness, quiet and still within the stone. Near the desk there may be a narrow shelf with a few rolled texts, a folded cloth, and a small ceramic jar. None of these things is decorative in any grand sense. They are simply useful, familiar, and placed where the hand can reach them without searching. That, too, is a kind of comfort, the comfort of not having to think about where anything belongs. As the afternoon continues, the light changes so slowly that it is almost impossible to notice the moment of change itself. A corner of paper grows softer in tone. The desk edge loses a little brightness. The scholar's sleeve moves through that dimmer light without resistance. Everything in the room seems to agree with the work, steady, quiet, and in no hurry to become evening. Then the brush is lifted, the tip touches ink, and the first character is begun. There is no rush. A copied text must be clear before it is beautiful, and steady before it is quick. So the brush moves with measured restraint until one character gives way to the next. Outside the window, the rain has thinned into drops falling now and then from the eaves. Bamboo leaves release the last moisture one bead at a time. The courtyard stones are darker than before, and a shallow puddle near the step reflects part of the roof and a pale slice of sky. From the street comes only the occasional sound of sandals on damp ground, a vendor calling once, or a cartwheel turning somewhere at the far end of the lane. Then there is quiet again, quiet enough to hear paper being shifted and a sleeve brushing the edge of the desk. Beside the scholar stands a cup of tea gone only slightly warm. He drinks from it without looking away from his work. Some afternoons are filled with errands. This one is filled with copying, and the copying is enough. A page is completed and set aside. Another blank sheet is laid down. The brush is re-inked, and writing begins again. There is calm in work that repeats without being exactly the same, in the hand repeating, the characters repeating, and each stroke still made only once. Far away, perhaps from the temple, a bell is heard again. The scholar does not stop for it. He simply lets the sound pass through the afternoon, as one more element in a day composed mostly of paper, rain, wood, tea, and silence. Gradually, the light begins to change, and the room turns calmly toward evening. Chapter 5. Dusk and Lanterns. Evening arrives so gradually that, for a little while, no one can say exactly when afternoon ended. The rain has stopped, the air is fresh, and the roof tiles hold a last muted light before turning gray again. In the fields outside town, farmers gather their tools and begin the slow walk home. Mud clings to sandal edges. Sleeves are rolled down again as the air cools, and baskets are checked for what has been harvested. The walk back is slower than the walk out in the morning. Not unhappy, simply tired in the plain, familiar way that comes from ordinary work. At the edge of town, people pass one another with little more than a nod. They have seen one another at wells, at market stalls, and on the paths between plots of land. Nothing particular needs to be reported. In a peaceful place, that is often enough. The market street is changing shape again. Cloth is folded, jars are sealed, boards are wiped down, and the remaining coins are counted with dry fingers before being tied in a small pouch. A tea seller rinses bowls and turns them upside down to dry. Cooking fires brighten in homes one by one. Through half-open doors comes the smell of rice, greens, sesame oil, and warm broth. A knife taps steadily on a board, Lids are lifted and replaced, and evening food remains simple because simplicity is what the hour asks for. In a courtyard, someone washes hands and face from a basin. A child is called inside. Wet clothing is moved a little farther under shelter. For a few minutes, the whole town seems to pause between labor and rest, between daylight and lamplight, between the outside world and the room within. Then the lanterns begin to appear, one under a shop eave, one beside a gate, and one hanging in a corridor, turning the wooden posts amber. They're not brilliant. Their glow is soft, enclosed, and human in scale, making circles of warmth rather than floods of light, while the spaces between them remain dim and gentle. Along one lane, the scholar closes his window and covers his ink. Paper is stacked, brushes are cleaned, and the desk returns to stillness. Work ends not with excitement, but simply because evening has come. At the temple, lantern light shines under the eaves while the courtyard stones continue to dry from the rain. A monk crosses the square with quiet steps. Somewhere deeper in the buildings, a bell is sounded for the evening, and its tone rolls outward over trees, rooftops, lanes, and courtyards. It reaches the town as a gentle rounding off, a soft mark at the end of the day. Supper is eaten, steam rises from bowls, and sleeves are loosened. There may be a few words about prices, about weather, or about whether tomorrow might be clear, but conversation is light and brief. Soon lamps will burn lower, and soon the town will enter its quietest hours. Chapter 6. Night in Silence. Night settles over the town with great patience. Roof lines become darker shapes against darker air, and beyond the lantern glow, the lanes are already soft with shadow. No part of this feels sudden. The town has been leaning towards sleep since midday. Inside the houses, the final tasks are small and unadorned. Bowls are washed, ashes are banked, a door is checked, a window panel is closed against damp night air, and folded clothing is set within reach for dawn. Mats are laid out, quilts are shaken once, and a child's blanket is smoothed with the full palm of a hand. Outside, the street is not empty all at once. One last passerby goes home with a covered basket. A neighbor slides a bolt into place. Sandals make a fading sound on the lane, then stop. Somewhere farther off, a dog gives a single bark and decides not to continue. Inside the houses, night is full of the smallest possible sounds. A quilt settles. A wooden frame answers the cooling air with a faint, dry click. Someone turns once in sleep, and then becomes still again. A ladle left near the stove touches the side of a pot almost too softly to hear. These sounds do not interrupt the silence. They belong to it. They are what silence becomes when people are living inside it, rather than standing outside it. A town at night is never perfectly empty of sound. It is simply reduced to sounds so light and ordinary that the mind no longer holds on to them. That is why such hours feel so restful. Nothing calls for attention. Nothing demands a response. The world is still present, but only in its softest form, breathing, cooling, settling, and waiting for dawn to arrive again in its own slow time. After rain, the night smells especially clear. Damp tile, cool earth, old timber, moss, a trace of ash, and the faint memory of tea all drift together when a breeze passes through. It is one of those quiet mixtures of scent that seem less like perfume than like the town itself, breathing in sleep. In the temple, the courtyard is fully empty now. The broom rests where it was placed, and the flagstones reflect only the faintest lantern glow from the covered walkway. Somewhere within the buildings, a page may still be turned, but from outside, the temple seems made almost entirely of stillness. Far away, a bell sounds once more. At night, bells seem slower than bells in daylight. The sound travels farther, lingers longer, and then fades so completely that it is hard to tell where the tone ended and where silence began. Above the town, clouds drift apart enough to reveal a little moonlight, just enough to silver the upper edges of roof tiles and leave a pale mark on wet stone. Inside one house, breathing has become slow and even. Inside another, a lamp goes out. In another, embers settle softly with almost no sound at all. The scholar sleeps. The merchants sleep. The farmers sleep. The monk, too, will sleep before long. The town that spent the day in work now spends the night in quiet, with one simple hour passing gently into the next. Seen from above, if anyone had been there to see it, the town would have seemed almost motionless now. A few lanterns still glowing faintly under eaves. A few courtyards holding the last trace of dampness from the rain. A few narrow lanes lying in shadow between walls that have kept the warmth of day and are now slowly giving it back to the night. But no one stands above it, and no one needs to. It is enough that the town has settled into itself. The farmers, the merchants, the monk, the scholar, the children, sent on morning errands, the hands that poured tea and counted coins and folded cloth, all have withdrawn into rest. The ordinary day has completed itself without strain, and because it has been so ordinary, it has become especially easy to leave behind. Nothing sharp remains. Nothing unresolved lingers. Only the memory of tiled roofs, damp stone, warm tea, brushed paper, lantern light, and one bell sounding far away in the dark. And now, as the town falls fully silent, you may let it recede into the distance. Let the roofs dim. Let the lanterns go out one by one. Let the temple bell fade into the dark air. There is nothing more to do here tonight. The bowls are washed. The doors are closed. The brush has been set down. You can rest too. Keep only the simplest parts with you. The warmth of tea, rain on gray tiles, a broom on stone, a page turning in a quiet room, and one distant bell. Let all of it grow softer now, softer and farther away, until you drift with it, slowly and comfortably, into sleep.